Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the live. Welcome to the live. Everybody, tune in, hit the like button, let everybody know that we're here. It's the moment we've all been waiting for, the interview we've all been waiting for. It's the post-acquittal interview with the brains behind the jury selection, the selection of the jury, which is kind of everything that gave us this acquittal and not guilty verdicts on the major counts here in the YSL trial. And wait for everybody to get in here. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you. We're going to get started here in a second. We'll see if we can bring up some questions later on, but we'll get right into it. And this is some people know her as YSL Granny, but this is Trisha Renaud, I believe it is. She is joining us from Atlanta, where she is a jury consultant, and she has worked with Brian Steele for years. She was a journalist before she became a jury consultant, and she met Brian through her work as a journalist, as a legal journalist in Atlanta at the Daily Report, which has a storied reputation as a legal newspaper. When I worked at ALM, it owns the Daily Report, and the Daily Report was always one of the flagship newspapers. Like all newspapers, today it's not what it once was, but it has a really strong legacy in legal reporting, and that's where Trisha got her background, and we're going to talk all about that. But first, we're going to get into everything YSL trial, because I know everyone is really interested in how this jury was selected and her thoughts on this year-long trial. So bring her up here. Trisha, thank you so much for joining us. I know everyone's really excited to see you and get to talk to you in person. I was once talking to Max Shard about the fact that sometimes people see the people like you and attorney bots who don't have speaking roles in trial and really wonder what they do. So it's great to be able to, because I said a lot of the times they're doing, a lot of work, most of the work behind the scenes. So it's great to be able to hear from you. I know you weren't in the courtroom for the verdict because you were working with Brian Steele. So after Jeffery Williams took the plea deal, that ended your technical involvement in the case. But you said you were still following it, right? Can you tell us where you were when the verdict came in?
I was actually in my living room. I followed the trial after I left the courthouse, and I had it on background. I was doing something else online, probably hunting for ideas for Christmas gifts for my grandkids. But I heard there was noise in the courtroom and switched screens. And it was absolutely wonderful. I was thrilled for those guys, for all the lawyers and everyone who worked so hard on this. It was wonderful.
Such a long time coming. Was it a surprise to you?
Not really. I felt very comfortable that Diamante Kendrick would be acquitted. With Shannon Jackson, I did not follow the drink material quite as well, but Max did such a wonderful job. He sort of switched my thinking. And I thought, he just may go home too. So, yes, I was not particularly surprised, no.
And did you see the difference in the possible outcomes as just a matter of the evidence in the Thomas case versus the evidence in the Drinks case?
I thought both of those cases were lacking in evidence, especially after watching Detective Hogan, the issue with the surveillance video. I did not think it was as weak a case initially, but Max knew it better than me.
Yes.
But he did a great job.
Yes. So can you take us back to your initial involvement in this case? Was it, I mean, you were there for jury selection. That's your big part of it. Before this, had you ever done, or what was the largest jury pool you'd worked with before this?
Maybe a little over 100. So that's
and then this was
crazy.
2000, was it?
Yes. right around 2000.
Wow. So
Um,
how did that affect what you were doing? Did it affect what you were doing? Just the sheer number of
well,
people?
for starters, before we even had the jury pool, when I work on cases with Brian, he wants me to review the discovery. And I did in this case. All 8 terabytes.
Wow.
I started in July 2022, shortly after the indictment, and continued reviewing discovery. And they kept providing discovery even when trial got underway. So, but I was on top of discovery. I kept myself an index, trying to keep tabs on it. My index was over 600 pages.
Wow. Wow.
It was the only way to find things for me. I could search it by name, by topic, and it's just something I put together for myself. But it was that long. It kept growing and growing and growing.
And what are you looking for when you're putting that together? How is that informing your decisions on the jury?
I'm looking for issues that are good for us, potentially troublesome for us. Um, I'm trying to put together what the story is here, really. And I'm assisting Brian in putting together cross examinations for witnesses. Um, and some of that is before even we got the jury pool. Once the jury pool started, it was we got to tackle the questionnaires, which were very time consuming to go through. Luckily, the judge had agreed to let us do a questionnaire. I had drafted a questionnaire and other people contributed. It got bigger, a total, I think, 39 pages. But we had a tremendous amount of information.
And what types of questions were on the questionnaires?
We asked people's backgrounds, their experience with the criminal justice system. We asked, did they know the Cleveland area? Any experience with gangs? We asked opinions on rap. Do you listen to rap? How often? We asked about if they thought lyrics were usually autobiographical. We asked some hardship questions. We asked if they knew any of the lawyers in the case. Things sort of to help cut down on the time for voir dire. So I went through the questionnaires and pulled out, there were certain questions. Do you automatically assume that someone who raps is more likely to be a criminal than other people? Those are the kind of hot button questions that I was interested in. And I would keep track of responses. And this was all while the hardships were going on.
And how many responses did you get to that question that made you say, let's not have this person on the jury? Can you pinpoint a number?
A fair number. I can't give you an exact number, but yes. But it was very helpful in knowing how to talk to people. And some questions pretty much already disqualified someone. They would say, I've heard all about this. I can't be fair. I really hate gangs. We wouldn't have to go much further. There were.
It made it pretty easy.
Yeah.
Were there challenges in making sure none of those people were on the jury? I mean, sometimes it doesn't always work out the way you want it, but was it pretty easy to eliminate those people given the size of the pool?
A lot of people had hardships, so that really whittled it down without getting to that first. Yeah, I would say we had a pretty good pool to select from by the time we got done with individual questions. There were a few, there are always a few you can't get for cause, who we would have liked to have gotten for cause. But
Did you have an idea of who your ideal juror was, or who your ideal jurors would be? Just a hypothetical. And who would they be? Can you describe them?
you know, first of all, you probably know, Meghann, that you don't select jurors, you deselect them. You're
Right.
really striking people you would not like to see on the jury. So in terms of those people, we look for people who are very rule-oriented, law and order-oriented, who have ties to law enforcement, who victims of crime, people who had experience with gangs, and some of the typical thing, and people who thought rap was horrible. There were people who thought it was horrible. It was full of misogyny and bad words and tattoos. We asked about tattoos. There were some people who thought if you had tattoos on your face, you were a criminal, no doubt. So those people, they just couldn't get past certain things.
Yeah.
But when you're looking, in terms of people you're looking for, I look for open-minded people. It's really not a question of demographics. I could see the state was striking younger jurors, people who listen to rap, particularly young Black men that I believe they were afraid would identify with the defendants. And it was obvious that young jurors in general were not going to be put off so much by rap or the language or the tattoos. But demographics is really not a good method for selecting a jury. And I can give you a good example from this jury. There were two, and I won't give their numbers, but there were two white jurors who came from totally different backgrounds from our clients. And you might think, well, they can't relate at all. It was almost as though they were raised in a different culture. One was from a rural background, and one had never been around guns, was kind of appalled by guns. But what they had in common was they were open-minded people, and they were curious. One of the jurors, one of those two, said she had recently, to educate herself, read the book, The Hate You Give, which told me this was a woman who wanted to learn and was a kind woman. The other person was from a different culture, curious and open. And they were terrific jurors, but they had this innate kindness and open-mindedness to them. Yeah. So if you went by demographics, you wouldn't think they would be great jurors, but they were.
Now, I see a lot of people in the chat asking about Juror 409, who I believe is the alternate who's given the interview, and basically indicated that she would have forced a hung jury because she thought that they were guilty. Does that surprise you, just knowing what you knew about the jury? Were you expecting anyone like that?
We were hoping not. I can't say I am surprised by that interview. I watched the jurors during the whole trial. I'm taking notes, not on the jurors, but on what the witnesses are saying. But at the same time, I'm watching the jurors, and I sensed a lot of affinity with the two lead prosecutors in the case.
Yeah.
On her part. So I was not surprised by that.
And you're basing that on just reaction, general facial expressions when they're talking, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You had a
Yeah.
lot of days to observe them, so that had to have aided
Yeah.
to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
remember Attorney Botts in our interview the other day was saying that he thought it was overall favorable to the defendants to be in court so many days because the number of positive interactions that the jurors can see the defendants have, like with the deputies, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
goes on. How did that? How did you keep that in mind when you were looking at the jury or trying to read reactions?
Yes, and you always tell your client that someone is always watching, one juror at least, and yes, their demeanor is very important. The interactions with the deputies, yes, people were a little more relaxed as the trial went on, especially after the change in judge, I'll have to say.
Yeah, yeah. And so after the jury is selected, how does your job change when you're sitting in there every day?
When I work with Brian, he wants me to take notes. I'm not a court reporter, so I don't take transcripts, but I'm writing down key points of what the witnesses are saying. And it's for use later in compiling closing arguments or in reviewing or in cross-examination of that witness. So I take notes. So I have trial notes on every day I was in court. And some days much more than others.
And you're thinking of this all from the standpoint of the juror people standpoint, the narrative. How is the narrative coming out? Is that what you're looking for here?
That, yes, and sometimes specific facts that we want to tie something to later on.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, but the narrative is really important, and I think that's from the beginning was a huge problem for the state.
Yes. Yes.
I re-listened to the opening statement the other day. I was lost, and I know the case. And I remember sitting there that day and thinking, you know, I know this case, but I can't follow this. It was everywhere.
Yes.
No story.
Had you done cases involving rap lyrics as evidence? And I mean, surely you'd done cases involving social media as evidence just in this day and age, Instagram posts, but had you?
Some, not anywhere near to
Yeah.
the extent as this case. Usually it's phone evidence, texts, timing of phone calls, emails. That's much more than social media.
Not just the post stands alone kind of thing. They're looking at the timing.
I don't recall anything quite like this. This
Yeah.
trial was different than most anything I've worked on, I will have to say, in many ways. Not just in the length, but the type of evidence. And I think the state might think twice on this heavy reliance on social media. It was not very effective.
Yes, it seems
That and the lyrics combined.
that's what I've seen from the jurors in the interviews. After have you gotten a chance to watch much of these juror interviews?
I think I have seen most of them. Yes. Yes, I was really interested. I hated that I could not talk to them at the end.
Is there anything that surprises you about what they said?
I felt in watching them as the trial progressed that they were increasingly sympathetic to us.
Yeah.
I had a good, strong sense of that. Obviously, I can't read minds, so you don't know. It's all observation, and but I felt very good about the jury. I was a little surprised by the extent to which they agreed with
Yeah.
us. It was almost like everything I'd been thinking about this case, they had the same opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you talked earlier about certain pieces of evidence. When you're sitting there, you're considering the importance of evidence and how it's coming in. One thing we heard a lot about was the McDonald's surveillance video, or should we say the lack of McDonald's surveillance video.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that, or were there other pieces of evidence you were focused on too?
Well, I work on cross-examinations with Brian before trial. And we sat down and went over witnesses. So there was a plan for particular points, but sometimes new things come up. You never know what to expect. Some of these witnesses were totally unexpected in how they testified.
Who was the most unexpected you remember?
I had no clue what Kenneth Copeland would do. Not a clue. I had heard the jail calls. I had listened to the interview. He was a real wild card.
Yeah. I remember thinking to myself that I didn't understand how there was any way the jury could do anything but just disregard everything he said. What did you think?
That was my opinion. Throw it all out. Otherwise, you got to pick through things and, well, maybe this is right, maybe that's not right. Yeah, you throw it all out. And the other thing that about him and Quindarius Zachary, everything they knew was based on being told to them by Demeke and Garlington, who wasn't even there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was once removed from the start. But yes, he was a wild card. But there were witnesses. I think my favorite witness in terms of how it helped our case was Trontavious Stevens.
Yes.
He came early in the case. They had already heard a week of a gang detective. They had heard evidence about Durante Beebe. He wasn't in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And drug charge involving Nichols. And then they brought in Trontavious Stevens. And my sense was the jurors felt so bad for him. They liked him.
Yeah.
Despite the fact you wouldn't like the things he did in 2013 or 15. But the guy had tried to get his life together. And lo and behold, he's charged in this RICO indictment. And he'd just gotten his commercial driver's license, but couldn't look for work because he had to sit in the courtroom.
Yes.
And it was so unfair to use his prior acts that he'd done time for to drag him into this case in order to give testimony. And the jurors liked him. I think they felt really bad. He'd been in juvie since he was, 11?
Yeah.
In and out. And it really struck me when he said, if it wasn't for Jeffery Williams, I would never have gone outside 285.
Yeah.
So I thought he had an amazing impact in telling the narrative of the case without intending to so much. It's just his life was a great illustration.
And I remember Brian Steele's cross-examination really seemed to focus on that. Was that the focus of your conversation with Brian when you were talking about what should the cross-examination look like here?
I probably can't go into that, but
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of work that went into this case. It was night and day since July 22. Crazy out.
Yeah, I can imagine just the prep, all the stuff that you had to prepare for, first of all, and then how did Judge Glanville's sporadic trial schedule affect you, and then also the jury?
I think it was grossly unfair to the jury. It dragged the whole case out. And for some reason, it got blamed on the defense. You guys weren't here on time. It was just so bad for the jury. I can't imagine. Now, the jurors cleared it with their employers. And I know there were people who thought they weren't getting paid anything, but most of them got their regular salary, or they weren't going to be there.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, your life is on hold. I know some of them had life events. I had 2 major life events during this trial and during the preparation. And I'm surprised we did not lose more jurors than we did.
Yeah, I'd always thought that would end the trial. The jurors would just drop out, but it sounds like
I kind of did too.
They just weathered on. Is that what you had to do when you had the life events? I mean, you had maybe a little bit more leeway, or?
I had, well, one of them occurred. I lost my husband.
Oh, no.
While I was preparing for the case.
Wow.
And we were not in trial.
Yeah. Oh, no.
But the other was in the spring of this year. I had compression fracture in my back. So I was out about a month or so. I was out when Brian got held in contempt.
Oh. How did you find out about that?
Watching online.
Yeah. Were you watching in real time when that happened?
Yes.
And
you wouldn't have wanted to hear what I said.
Of course, the jury was not in the courtroom for that, but how did you think that the entire break and just the chaos was going to affect the jury?
A lot of speculation probably on their part.
Yeah.
I have to kind of think somebody looked on social media. I have no evidence anyone did, but it's quite possible. And I think they were very relieved when the jurors, when the judge was replaced. We had a real schedule and things seemed like they were moving. But I know people had family they couldn't see, travel plans, vacation, graduations, weddings to go to. They put their life on hold for months and months and months. It's amazing to me that they did that. They were amazing.
And did you think that just the length of the case and what the jurors were going to go through was going to make it harder for the state?
I didn't think that initially, but as it went on, yeah. The state went on and on and on. Some witnesses were on the stand almost a month. And I heard it in the interviews. One juror said, "Why did we spend almost a month on a case where a car crashed into the side of a laundromat? What was that about?"
Yeah.
So I think it really, really worked against the state. First, that they didn't have a narrative And second, that it's too much evidence, too many people, too many names to keep straight. And the pace was horrible.
Yes.
Horrible.
Yes. And everyone knows that this is the longest criminal trial in Georgia state court history.
Mm-hmm.
Given your experience with trials, had you ever seen anything like it, just in the sheer size of the case and what they were trying to do?
No,
Yeah.
I had not. I mean, I've worked on some cases with sizable discovery, but nothing like this. Nothing.
Yeah.
And it was made so huge, not so much documents, but video interviews and social media posts and chats and phone dumps and jail calls. The jail calls, I estimate over 50,000 jail calls in this case. I didn't listen to those, believe me, select ones.
But I see someone asking what the name of your position as a career is. And you just describe yourself as a jury consultant?
Or a trial consultant. Because it's really, what I do is about more than the jury. I try to bring a juror's perspective to a case.
Yes. Yes.
I've been around lawyers long enough. They think like lawyers. They're supposed to.
Yes.
But that's not always the same as how a juror would look at an issue or a case.
Yes.
So I do that through sometimes polls, sometimes focus groups, mock trials, means that we can test the case, test the issues in the case. I can't give you specifics about preparing for this one, but that's typically what I do. And it's all designed to take a second look. And every time I do a focus group, I'm amazed. I get 12 people or 10 people in a room, and you don't want to win a focus group. In fact, you really want to lose it because you learn more that way. And you present the case against you and get people talking. What's the real issues here? What bothers you about this? What do you think about this? Invariably, you come away with 10 things, new things that you learn.
And how do you find the participants for these?
There are people who recruit people to sort of reflect the demographics of an area, for Fulton County in this case. And you get people who don't know anything about the case. They screen them ahead of time. They sign a confidentiality agreement. And they get paid for their time to offer their opinions. It is invaluable.
Sounds like it, yeah. How many focus groups did you do for this case?
I can't say. Can't say.
Yeah,
can't say. But it is something I do on a regular basis with Brian.
So we were talking about Brian Steele's infamous contempt arrest, and you weren't in the courtroom for that, but when you were watching online, I was going to say it had to have brought back some memories for some people, and I'll bring up an article to show people. And we don't have the actual archives, but this is from 2003, and this is an article that Trisha wrote for the Daily Report, and it says 2 years ago, Brian Steele refused to try a client's case, and a Gwinnett County judge sent him to jail. His stay in jail lasted 6 hours, and the Georgia Court of Appeals sprang him. And now the Georgia Supreme Court has concluded that Steele was right in the argument he had made to Gwinnett Superior Court Judge James W. Can you take it from there? You tell us
I can't remember much of the particulars. I really can't. I hate that, but I do know His wife got him out of jail, as I recall. I think it had something to do with the specific charges were incorrect or something. I cannot recall. I don't want to say. I'm not a lawyer, so
Sure.
no desire to be.
You go way back with him. How did you start working with him?
I was working at the Daily Report, had no legal background, first of all. I've learned a lot in the years since then, and I started there in 1988 and was there 15 years. During that time, I think Brian was public defender part of that time in Fulton County. I wrote a lot of stories on the indigent defense system in Fulton County, which was pretty horrible in the 90s. You had public defenders who had caseloads of 700 felonies at a time. The story was entitled Meet 'em and Plead 'em, which is kind of what was happening in Fulton County. The caseloads were so atrocious. Mm-hmm. And it really, the stories affected some change. And I met Brian around that time, started covering some of the cases that he was trying, and ended up doing a profile of him. Probably, I can't think of the exact year. Would have been maybe mid-90s. And I was very struck by how two things. One is how he tells a story, a narrative about what occurred, and he's very good at that. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is how you look at him and you know he believes in his client 1,000%. There's no doubt in your mind. And that's what struck me about him. So we had, I followed a case of his, and I was covering it for the paper, and he asked for my opinion on it and how it was going, and I gave my opinion. I think he was a little taken aback in that it wasn't going that well, but I think he appreciated the frankness. And it was a couple of years later, he approached me and said, I really would like you to work on my cases. As a consultant. And he said, you understand trials, you understand the ebb and flow, you watch the effects on people, and you understand it. I want your help. And I told him he was out of his mind. I didn't know how to do that. But we talked some more later, and I agreed to come and work on his cases. I set up my own business, so I do work for some other lawyers. But it's been a wonderful partnership for over 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
He is probably the hardest working person I have ever met in my entire life. I get texts at 4 a.m. I had to turn off the dings on my phone. And we have worked till midnight sometimes on cases, work cases in other states. But the other thing about him, and I want to get to the other lawyers in this case too, because they're wonderful lawyers in this case. But Brian is probably one of the nicest people you will ever meet. Everyone in the courthouse knows him. He says hello to everyone unfailingly.
Yeah.
Is that where you are?
Yeah, yeah. So I've got the downtown Los Angeles. I'll try to mute it.
Okay. He is unfailingly polite to everyone. In 20 years until this trial, I have never heard him say a bad word about another lawyer. Never. And in this case, it only took the form of calling Adrian Love unlove.
Yeah. Or just omitting the honorable.
Or dropping the honorable. So that's why it was it was very upsetting to watch the false accusations made by the prosecutors against him for doctoring evidence and misrepresenting. It was really outrageous.
Yeah. And when that was going on, when it did happen in front of the jury, what was your reaction? Were you able to discern what they were thinking?
I think that the prosecutors, by their conduct, lost a lot of support on the jury. Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, it was a gradual thing, and it was in part because of the length of the case, how tedious it was, but in part because of demeanor. You know, when you sit at a table and make faces when the other side says something, it's not reflective of professionalism. Mm-hmm. And jurors don't like that.
In my experience, I'd heard from attorneys that that's the number one thing jurors say they hate is the expressions from attorneys at tables. Does that match your experience?
Yeah.
So I know there was a moment with the witness. I think it was Detective Gaither was having some really animated reactions, and the attorneys were complaining about it. And I was kind of making the case at home that that's just all part of the package for jurors to consider if the witnesses are being kind of combative or rolling their eyes or making comments. And it sounds like the jurors did not take it well. I've heard some of their comments about that. Did you expect that?
Maybe. But I think jurors expect detectives to be professionals and to not have a personal stake in things. They want to know that their analysis and the facts they are giving are objective.
Yeah.
So they don't want them to take it personally. So, there were other detectives in the case who were very good witnesses. Mm-hmm. Detective Quinn, he's a great witness. And I noticed the juror's reaction. He testified on the Adrian Bean matter.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, way back.
I do.
And he had said he did not charge Jeffery Williams because he would not take the word of one person. Mm-hmm. And the jurors, I looked over at them when he said that, and they were like, okay, why are we here? I could see the bells going off. The same thing with the detective who investigated the alleged armed robbery of Antrevia Smith. And at the end of his testimony, well, he didn't believe her.
Yeah.
So the case went nowhere, and they're like, why are we here?
Yeah.
It's the same. So those people were very matter of fact. They didn't have a dog in the fight.
Did you expect the state to have so many of their own witnesses that they needed to discredit?
No, not really. I had no idea some of these witnesses would do it. You just don't know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, surely in the trials you've worked before, you've seen that before here and there, but just so many of them in one trial was pretty unheard of, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Kenneth Copeland was entertaining. I've never quite seen anyone bring the audience in to answer the question when he asked Jeffery the question.
Yeah. I saw, and I meant to highlight this. I think it was from Ocean Beach is the name. She asked how the social media feedback, if you were reading any of that, and if that was kind of informing your decisions at all when you were looking at this, just the Twitter masses on the YSL trial.
Well, I appreciate all of the folks out there following the trial, and the support, I'm sure, meant a lot to the defendants in this case, and it did to the lawyers also. I read the chat at times. I did not want to. I knew people in there had very strong opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Some were total fans and would not believe anything negative. Others wanted them all in jail, buried under the jail if they could. So people were kind of in camps. But yeah, there were things to be learned. And I appreciate all the comments. I couldn't sit there and read it all day. But yes, that's how I discovered my nickname.
YSL Granny, and you embrace it, right? We had YSL Granny, and then I think Attorney Bots was YSL Grandpa. So the two.
My kids thought it was hilarious. So.
That's great. Had you? Surely you'd worked cases in Atlanta, trials in Atlanta that had been high profile in Atlanta, right? Had a lot of media attention in Atlanta. Was it the same type of effect on the trial, just on a bigger basis, or how can you compare the two?
It was quite a bit bigger. Although the media presence, there was one camera in the courtroom. So I think people tended to forget about that. If you were a juror,
mm-hmm.
I've been in cases where there are tons of reporters in a courtroom, and because it's a local issue, and there were more than one cameras and flash cameras and TV cameras, but it was a little subdued. I know we had one juror who was upset because she thought she got caught on camera once, but
yes,
and but there's always a concern in a case that's high profile. Will jurors worry about what people think of their verdict? And that's one of the questions we had in the questionnaire that was very important.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to worry about what your family thinks, your relatives, people you work with? Will that affect your decision making?
And did you expect them to stay off social media like the order is? Or not stay off social media, but stay away from social media coverage or any kind of coverage of the case. Did you think that they would abide by that?
By and large, I think they did. I can't say. Surely someone probably peeked or heard something from a relative or friend somewhere along the line. They had long breaks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm used to a 2-week, 3-week trial, and it's easier to keep someone off social media than this went on for so long. But by and large, jurors try to follow the rules. There's something that comes over people when you take an oath and you're sitting in a courtroom in front of a judge, and this is serious, and it's a serious obligation. Most people take it very seriously and try to do their best. So that's been my experience in general.
Has there been anything that really stood out from the jury reaction, or just the way they've kind of responded to finally being able to talk about this? I mean, have you seen jurors make Twitter account or YouTube accounts before in other cases?
No, I have not, but more power to them.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much interest in this. They
also had to go for so long not being able to talk about it. Mm-hmm. It's unnatural. It really is. They couldn't even talk to each other in a back room. It's really unnatural because it fills your head and you can't talk about it. So yes, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. It's a good thing. I do want to talk about all the lawyers in here.
Yeah, please.
I worked with a wonderful bunch of lawyers here. I came in when there were fewer than the start of jury selection because some folks were severed out. But Keith, I'd not worked with Keith before. He's delightful.
Yeah. Yes.
And terrific at cross. Very precise, to the
jury
point.
seemed to love him too, from what I've heard.
I'm sorry?
The jury seemed to love him too, from what I've heard.
Yes, they liked him very much. They did. They did. And I had not known Max before working on this case. He is terrific. Bruce Harvey, I knew from before previous things.
And you sent me, can we get into the backstory on that? You sent me the article from, I think it was 1988 when
Yes.
a case involving you was actually a test of reporter shield law. And Bruce Harvey was one of the attorneys who wanted to cross-examine you. Can you talk about your role with Bruce there?
Yes. Before I want to mention the other lawyers. Doug did a terrific job. Matthews. I learned a lot from all of these people. And we had a great support staff too. Shaq.
Yes.
Of course, everyone loved Shaq. And Bram, Courtney, Haley, all kinds of people worked on this case to help. So the story with Bruce Harvey, I was kind of new at the Daily Report, and I did a story on the Douglas County Sheriff, who was sort of what's that old movie? Old style sheriff who runs the county. Earl Lee was his name. And I interviewed 3 former deputies who told me that they had a regular practice of eavesdropping and recording lawyers' clients with their clients, lawyers' conversations with their clients at the jail, which is totally illegal. And I wrote the story and got slapped with a subpoena by the DA in Douglas County to come to the hearing. This was a death penalty case out there. And so the DA summoned me to court. And at the time I got the subpoena, there was no shield law in Georgia. And they were working on getting it passed, so it was kind of a race. Do I have to go to court before there is a law? But thankfully, it did get passed. I did have to go on the witness stand, which was pretty terrifying. I have lots of sympathy for witnesses, having gone through that experience. And the threat was I would be incarcerated in the jail of the sheriff who I'd written about. So he was not happy. What added to it was that I had written a story on the judge, which was not real flattering either. So I didn't know who would hate me worse, the sheriff or the judge. Turns out it was the sheriff. But Bruce Harvey was one of the defense lawyers. And when we got to court, the prosecutor said, I'm not asking any questions. It's their job. They raised this in a motion. We contend it didn't happen. So they had to question me. And I got to claim the reporter shield, and the judge upheld it. So it's, but it was kind of a sticky situation.
Yeah. And Bruce was at that point pretty well known in Atlanta. Had you worked with him before?
He was. I had not really worked with it. I knew him from stories here and there. Yes, he was.
Yeah.
But actually, we didn't talk about that old experience in this trial.
Well, there
I
was
just
so much going
reminded him
on
of
in this trial. You know, one thing I was going to ask about was the change in judge. I mean, it was so celebrated by the defense, but I'd always kind of wondered, as horrible as Glanville was with trial management, did the chaotic schedule kind of benefit the defense to just have this never-ending trial? What do you think? Were you happy when
Well,
the judge took
the
over?
schedule may have, but his he was biased, and his biased rulings did not help. They were very unfair, in my opinion. So it was a double-edged sword, really. Some things helped and some things did not. But I was just appalled by the ex parte. It was, I don't know what to say about it, but.
And then what about the fact that the judge who reviewed the recusal motions over it basically seemed fine with that, but then found her own reason to recuse him that wasn't even in the recusal motions?
I think people look for easy ways to resolve things
Yeah.
that are equally legally valid, but it's the easy way. And that's to be expected. But I've never heard of a judge and prosecutor getting in chambers with a sitting witness, pressuring that person to testify.
Do you think if they had done that, but Glanville's trial management approach had been the same as Judge Whittaker's, and that they start on time, there are no comfort breaks, do you think Judge Krause still would have found her own reason to recuse him for this? I always got the impression that the judges were embarrassed by how poorly he was handling the trial and knew that they needed to get him out of there because of that.
I don't know. Don't know. It could be. I'm not privy. I used to hang, when I was a reporter, I hung out at the courthouse. I would hear more of the gossip than I do these days. But,
yeah. So how did Judge Whittaker taking over the case change your days and how you approached your job? Did it?
Just moving on time, and everything with accelerated a little. I suppose there was a slight benefit to the longer times. You had a little more time to prepare, and we were still catching up on discovery when Glanville, because they kept serving us with discovery. It just kept coming. And Glanville had no problem with them doing so late. Anyway, yes, there were a lot of things that were so irregular in this trial. It's I was so upset that the state of Georgia used its resources to follow a juror because they didn't want to use a strike on this person, and they wanted to try and prove he didn't live in the county.
Wow.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Wow.
Never. They followed this person for days. If the rest of the jurors knew that, oh, it would have been pretty bad. But I can't imagine that happening, but it did.
Yeah. Now, I know in the beginning you'd said that, the Diamante Kendrick acquittal definitely didn't surprise you. You were wondering a little bit more about the drinks evidence, but Max really worked it together well and it came together. When did you start realizing when you were watching the trial that these other cars in that video could be like a defensive smoking gun?
When they started showing it, I didn't. I saw it, but it didn't click for me because I was not as focused on it, I'll have to say.
Yeah.
But you just couldn't. The discovery was so voluminous, you could not pay the same amount of attention to all of it. But yeah, he did a great job.
And when I was at law.com, a bunch of reporters did a story about how jurors are changing and how a lot of people think that they're becoming more skeptical of science and they really want a lot of proof and evidence. Would you say that's true over the years?
I would say there was a CSI effect for a while. When that started coming up, people wanted DNA in every case.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, people do want more proof. In a case like this, the proof was so lacking in a lot of areas. It was bolstered by social media and lyrics and videos of kids hanging out on the street.
Yeah.
And so knows so-and-so. But yes, I do think people want, they wanted the phone records for one thing, for Diamante Kendrick. They didn't have those.
Mm-hmm.
For
the night of the Thomas
murder. Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't have phone records for Shannon then. And all they had were two witnesses who disavowed what they said on the stand and said they all heard it from a third guy who wasn't even there.
Yeah.
So it's a serious lack of evidence. Serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
one thing we saw, especially with Antonio Sumlin's testimony, of course, this was after Jeffery was out of the trial, but prosecutors seem to be more aggressive about trying to enforce their plea deals. And we saw Montauk have his probation revoked, and somebody's asking what you think about that and how he was treated on his stand for his probation revocation. Do you think that was a common probation revocation, or what was your reaction to that?
I felt really bad for him. It's and a lot of these guys said, I got hauled into this indictment for things in the past. I did my time for that. Now you arrest me, you keep me in jail without bond, and then you stick a piece of paper in front of me. Sign this and you can go home. And agree to say this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a terrible way to put a case together. It's not humane. It really is not. When I first looked at this case in the discovery, I'm like, why are all these acts from 2013 in here? Why are all these things where people have either pled guilty, been found guilty, and done their time? Why are they here again? Mm-hmm. And I said, isn't this double jeopardy? And it was explained to me, well, it's all different in RICO.
Yeah. Well, and then the Judge Whittaker ended up ruling that only overt acts committed after 2017 could count toward the racketeering conspiracy charge. Did anyone expect that throughout the trial? Were there mumblings that could happen?
The statute, I believe, says that it has to be within 5 years of indictment. However, they were allowed to talk about those things.
Yeah, it's amazing that they wasted so much time on that stuff. What the hell?
Why?
Yeah.
It's just throw so much stuff up there, hoping it will stick.
Yeah, as somebody who's lived in that area and covered courts there for so long, how much did politics play into the decision to charge such a huge case after a arrest in the smell drinks case, which seems like it could have just been its own murder case, but it suddenly became this huge gang and RICO case?
I don't know all the ins and outs in the DA's office. I do know that the prior DA had the Thomas case for a long time and never moved on it. And I have to guess, I don't know, that the reason was the witnesses were liars.
Yeah, they're reliable witnesses. What do you have here? Yeah.
What do you have? What do you have? You have people calling each other, and people at a McDonald's, and you have a rented car. But you have no eyewitnesses, and these people have lied so much. So I have to think that's why it wasn't brought for a long time. I think the use of RICO is unfairly used against minorities. I really do. This trying to make something where it's not there. I mean, I read the discovery and I'm like, well, if this is racketeering, these are the poorest racketeers I've ever seen, except Jeffery Williams. He's the only one who ever has money. I saw one of the overt acts was someone on a street corner selling bags of cocaine, and he had $50 in his pocket. If that's racketeering, these are really poor racketeers.
Yeah.
So, and I know that it doesn't have to be a strict organization with a hierarchy, but nonetheless, people were doing these things for themselves. These were random crimes. There clearly were crimes committed over the span of time. But this was not racketeering.
Yeah. And then I always remember seeing you on camera, and you were usually seated next to Keith Adams and Jeffery, and then Rodalius Ryan. And I was always struck by Rodalius's role in the trial, just because he's so young. But did you ever consider that when you were just thinking about the jury? I mean, here they're going to be staring at this teenager every day. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, he looks so young. So young. Yeah, he looked young. Mr. Huey looked young. There's some sort of generations of people who know each other, but he didn't even know some of the people in the case. Trontavious Stevens didn't know some of the people in the courtroom.
Yeah.
But yes, and all the guys were very nice to me, I'll have to say. I was Miss Trish. But and I felt bad for him. He was working on his GED in court.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that from somebody. At first, just when you're at home, you're kind of wondering if he's taking notes on the trial and everything, but no,
he was studying for his GED.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I know your official role in the trial ended after Jeffery took the plea, but how did you think the absence of the 4 defendants would affect Shannon Stillwell and Diamante?
I thought it might speed up the trial, and it did. It's hard to say how the jurors would have taken that. I don't think they thought people were incarcerated necessarily, because I think at that point they were leaning towards not guilty on, at least for Jeffery. But I don't know. There's an interesting dynamic of lawyers that is no longer there, so it throws a lot of more burden on the lawyers that are there in cross.
That's what Max talked about.
Yeah, it does. But they did great.
Yeah, definitely. And he talked about how, especially with Detective Viverito, he leaned on Brian Steele a little bit for that, because of course Brian Steele had prepped for that. Did you find yourself offering any advice or reminded anyone of some notes that you had on her or the evidence?
I got asked a few times via text message, can you send me so-and-so? I can't find it in the discovery, so I would send that. But I think Max had it all together, as did Doug. But I would have been happy to help.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And they did a great job in closing, I will have to say.
Yes. Putting it all together. What did you watch them in real time at home?
I was thinking of coming to the courthouse when I heard it was going to go possibly 9 hours. I thought, I'll watch it here.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did you think about the prosecution's closing?
Um, I thought that there was a lot of passion,
Mhm.
too much yelling, and I found it somewhat offensive.
Yeah.
To talk that way to jurors. You're a professional. People on the jury were professionals. All of them.
That's what they said in the
And to
interview.
talk like that,
By it.
I've seen that before, however, from this office. This adopting this street talk to make your points. I don't think it's professional. I think it's demeaning.
Mhm. I was struck, first of all, in Christian's closing, how he kind of immediately went to the burden of proof and beyond a reasonable doubt. And usually that's what you expect from the defense in their closing when they have nothing else to focus on. They lead with this probable reasonable
Mm-hmm.
doubt. I mean, the prosecutors you would expect to just be evidence, evidence, evidence in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Were
Mm-hmm.
you surprised by that, or what did you think?
Well, I have seen prosecutors use their first presentation to talk about the law before. I've seen it fairly frequently.
Okay.
And then they will come back and rebuttal and go evidence, evidence, evidence.
Yeah.
Um, so I was not surprised by that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the other thing I was thinking about with Trontavia Stevens so early in the case, it kind of set course because in direct, they asked him about the chats that he had been in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the 24 million on an end's head came in.
Oh, the little Uzi Vert.
And y'all haven't beat each other up or killed each other yet. That stuff came from. And bring me all the money, all of that. That came in on direct. And on cross, it just got decimated because that's not what it was about. It
Yeah.
was almost ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And it sort of set a course. You can't quite trust what the prosecutors are bringing you. So he was sort of a landmark witness to me. He got people sympathizing, and he sort of blew away some of what they thought was hot evidence.
Yeah. Yeah. He wasn't combative in that he wasn't just denying
No,
it, but he was not giving them what they wanted at all.
no, he was not combative. He was polite, and it's sad that he was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was a landmark witness for the
Yeah.
case, and it came early, which was a very good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So I know a lot of people are wondering, how do you become a jury consultant? And we've talked a bit about your background, but when I saw you went to Northwestern, right? Did you plan to get into legal affairs journalism when you went there?
I went to Northwestern for a year and a quarter
Okay.
in the journalism school, and this was 1971, and I dropped out to participate in the anti-war movement and
Nice.
went back to school 15 years later after I had 2 kids and tested out of things and went to Georgia State and um, took all the journalism classes there and was lucky to get a job at the Daily Report. Jury consulting, it's an interesting profession. There is a national organization, the American Society of Trial Consultants. It's a wonderful organization. And I learned a lot from them. People come to that profession from many different backgrounds. Some are lawyers, some are psychologists, some are communication specialists, some are theater people, all kinds of sorts of backgrounds. Because there's so much that goes into putting together a trial.
Yeah.
You've got people, you've got to try to figure out, you've got presentation. You don't have to know the law, but it helps some. If I were going to advise somebody who wanted to get into it, I would advise taking communications classes and psychology.
Yeah.
That's what I wish I had had more of, is psychology classes.
Yeah.
But people do have very varied backgrounds from doing this. And the whole profession really started back in the 70s with some of the high-profile trials that rose out of the anti-war movement. The Berrigan brothers, Wounded Knee. Some of those trials, people volunteered, people who were professors, and helped them use polling and social science to bring to defending these cases. So that's how it got born.
Yeah. When I worked at law.com, I had the honor of working at the very end of her career when she was at the Daily Report with Kathy Tucker. Did you work with Kathy at the Daily Report?
I know who she is, but I think she came after me.
Okay. She was after you, but
yeah.
Obviously, that just all the people that you met at the paper, not just Brian Steele, but all the other attorneys, really kind of gave you the pathway to open your own trial consulting firm.
Yeah.
How many?
I loved watching trials. I really do.
Yeah. How many do you think you worked as a reporter, and then how many do you think you've worked as a consultant?
Wow. Trials as a reporter, 75 maybe. And some I sat through all of it, some I sat through part of it. Then there were hearings. As a consultant, over 100. And some are small cases. And sometimes cases don't go to trial that I work on. So, but I'm sure it's over 100 different cases over the years.
Yeah. Where does this rank as? I mean, it's obviously the longest. Where does it rank as most memorable or most what?
I think it is the most memorable case I've worked on. Certainly the longest and the craziest. But it was an honor to work with all these lawyers. It was an honor to help Jeffery Williams. And it was a great experience. I'm kind of winding down now. I think I'll do a few more cases, but not much.
Yeah, I think
it's kind of time.
earned your retirement for sure. Will you be watching the second trial for the 5 other defendants if that happens?
I think I will. I am very surprised they are still leaving in the racketeering charges for these guys.
That's what I said. And it was funny because you could tell this person just had not been following the YSL trial, because they responded to my comment saying, why don't they just try Eppinger for the fact that they say he shot 2 cops and ignore the fact that he had YSL tattoos or whatever. And somebody said, oh, well, they're obviously trying to muddy up the other defendants with Eppinger's actions. It's like,
Yeah.
well, that's what you would expect of normal prosecutors and normally
Mhm.
work, but their approach to these conspiracy cases seems out of control. Do you think the presence of a body as the lead prosecutor versus Love could change things?
I think how the case was charged started it off on a bad foot.
Yeah.
I really do. It's overcharged. It just doesn't fit the facts. Just try a murder.
Mm-hmm.
If you think it was gang related, try it that way.
Yeah.
But to bring in every little drug sale on a street corner, social media post from people who aren't in the court, it could not hold together.
Yeah.
It just could not.
It was quite a disaster. Do you have any insight into where the DA's office goes from here? I mean, it seems like the kind of case, whether you think they never should have been charged and the prosecutors were totally wrong in that, or you think they should have been charged and the prosecutors just screwed up a big case. It's like, well, I think we can all agree somebody should be fired. Do you think there's any chance of like a reckoning with inside the DA's office? Or
I can't tell you.
Yeah.
I used to be very in touch with the former DA's office when I covered it as a reporter, and the judges then, who we got new judges now, and so I don't hang at the courthouse the way I used to.
Yeah.
But
Well, like you said, you might retire. I mean, you're looking to retire. You might do a couple more cases. Do you have anything immediately on the horizon, or are you looking to relax a little bit?
yeah, I'm looking to relax a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll all keep an eye on the jurors too. It was such a long trial. We couldn't expect them all to just immediately start talking, but it seems like we're going to start hearing from them.
I'm surprised. I think there's been 6 who have given interviews. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. There were 3 in one interview, and the 4th person, maybe that's 5.
Yeah.
And another one in the AJC.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, right.
And 4 not. That's 6. No, she was an alternate. 5 regular jurors. And
Yeah,
one
I think 2 of the jurors who talked to I'm not a lawyer, but Melanie, I think 2 of them were alternates, but I'm not sure. One of them definitely wasn't, but I think
one
2.
was. You're right. Mm-hmm.
What else should we know? Is there anything else you wanted to say about the trial, or just all the people who watched at home?
What other questions do people have?
If anyone
to answer if
everyone was so there were just so many different spots in the trial. One witness that stands out to me is the prisoner. We didn't get to see him on camera, but he was brought in to testify about calling 911 about the Dexter Montgomery shooting. And he just kept on saying he wanted to go back to prison.
He wanted to go back to prison. Yes.
Were you watching the jury when that happened?
There's so much shock for something like that. I think that we're shocked.
Yeah.
They did not know how to take it.
Yeah. Gosh, what was it? Last name was White. I see someone saying, what?
I can't think either.
But that was
so many names in this case. That's why I had a 600-page index.
Yeah, but as we talked about earlier, one of course that stands out is Woody, and you felt the witness that kind of changed the tide or really set the tone for the defense was Trontavious Stevens, but Woody was such a character for everyone. Like you said, you didn't know how he was going to testify going in based on his
and people laughed.
Yeah,
they really did. He was truly funny.
Yeah.
It's a shame that it took an ex parte meeting to get him on the witness stand.
Yeah. What about the fact that the defense, especially for Jeffery Williams and Shannon Stillwell, was that Woody was the killer of Donovan Thomas? Did you think that the jury was responding to that kind of alternate theory? Or
I don't know. It would be hard to reconcile if you're laughing at a guy on the stand,
Yeah.
in my opinion, but I don't know how they thought about that. I haven't heard them talk about that. Have you?
I have not, but I have not listened to all their interviews. I saw one of them did link
Mhm.
to them. And it seems like,
Yeah,
if anything, that allegation, even if they don't actually believe that Woody's the killer, it at least
it's more
serves
doubt.
this of doubt,
Yeah, yeah.
raising doubt.
And the fact that he admitted he had that car
Hmm.
and he knows where it went the night before
Yeah,
to his friend, that's got to create so much reasonable doubt.
yeah,
So, yeah, whether you think he did or didn't, I really don't know. Um, I kind of like Max. I wish him the best. I hope all these guys go on and do wonderful things.
yeah.
Uh,
What a,
it's
I mean,
it's been so unfair.
these are the kind of trials that make a career for a lawyer, right? Kind of before and after in your career. Do you see that for young guys like Max? Or
Absolutely, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And up and coming lawyers like Shaq,
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Kokomo.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking he probably has more trial experience than some of his law
Yeah,
professors
yeah, yeah.
already.
We
But
had some law students helping us. One who's in law school now, Haley, who did a ton of work on the case,
mhm.
helped a tremendous amount. So
and are they the ones who did a lot of the written work that was being filed? Because when you're in court all day, and prepping for witnesses, you don't really have time to do that as a lawyer.
you mean the motions?
Yeah, the motions that were filed.
Uh, Typically, I think Brian dictates those
Okay. Oh,
um, to his office staff, but
yeah.
they reviewed a lot of stuff. Um, Jail calls, we needed a lot of help doing that. There were so many. Every defendant, even ones who weren't there, we had their jail calls. And Kenneth Copeland, we had to listen to. He was in Fulton Jail in another metro area jail. Then he was in federal custody. So there were many jail calls. And we did the best we could. I know we didn't get through them all, but 50,000 would be conservative
Yeah.
estimate.
I saw someone ask earlier if you've ever or currently are trying to incorporate artificial intelligence into any of this, because it gets criticized a lot when lawyers just use it to write a big motion. But I think the real purpose of it is to help kind of sort and manage this huge amount of information. Has it ever, are you and Brian Steele ever embracing AI?
I know so little about it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's my age. I really don't know. But
Yeah, I think
I
that's
do know it was the way we got Discovery, it was impossible to search through it. And I know there's software for handling large amounts of discovery where
yeah,
you can search.
yeah.
And we didn't get it in that format, which was a terrible drawback.
I
I
know.
did use great software for jury selection, which was terrific. It helped me keep track of people. I had little boxes, a rating system.
Oh, that's great.
It was terrific, and I could move people on and off, and it was very good software called Vordier Edge.
Oh, Vordier Edge.
The lawyers out there are curious. Very handy.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, great. Well, I know everyone is really interested to, keep following the case with the other defendants and everything, and people want to see how Jeffery's probation is going to work. And I know somebody wants to know, and you said everyone treated you really well. What's your relationship like with Jeffery? Because you're technically your client or who you work with is Brian Steele, but you're working for Jeffery too when you're there.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And
I
you
did
have,
not meet Jeffrey till I got to court. Brian used to go see Jeffrey all the time in jail, or he would do a Zoom every night. Um, I did not meet Jeffrey until I got into court. And Jeffrey is smart, kind, um, and he was a strong person to be in custody without a bond for that long.
mm-hmm.
He had his spirits up. Um, we had chats about our lives. He gave me some advice and about things, and we just had some personal chats, and I'm so grateful he let me assist on his case.
Had you heard his music before this case?
I'll have to say no. I had not. My grandchildren certainly did.
Yeah.
They
Well,
said,
now
"Please
you
give
have.
me an autograph."
Thanks to the prosecutors and their evidence, you at least are familiar with a few songs now.
Yes, yes, I am, and looking forward to more. So, yes.
Yeah. Well, we're all waiting to see what he does, and I know there's already talk on Thugger Daily about when is going to be the first time that we actually hear new music from him. So, as a trial watcher, I'm just hoping that he writes something about the trial and pays
Yes,
homage to everybody.
yes,
So,
yes.
it'll be great.
I hope so too. He has a lot to say, I think, out of this experience. I know he's done one song on Trayvon Martin before,
Yeah.
which is a terrific song. And I told him he should do more like that.
Yeah.
But he should have a lot to say out of this experience.
Yeah. Great. Well,
And I'm looking forward to it.
Well, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for taking so much time to talk to us about the case and kind of fill us in on everything. I know there was so much curiosity about your approach to
What am I doing over there?
and like you said,
it's a retired judge.
Yeah. It's not so much jury selection as it is jury deselection. Who do you not want in there? And just based on the verdict, it seems like you did a bang up job. I mean, you can't eliminate everyone you don't want, but it seems like
you can't. You absolutely cannot.
You did.
You hold your breath and hope the other side doesn't get rid of the people you want. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
But we are very grateful for all the interest in the case. The media made a difference, keeping an eye on things. It
Absolutely.
really does. I'm a big believer in the press.
Well, so. And you, I mean, just having lived through the good old days of newspapers, know better than anyone how it is not the same landscape anymore. So it just seems like newspapers just don't have the resources to be covering this. And sites like Thugger Daily were basically setting the editorial agenda for a lot of publications like Rolling Stone and stuff, who you can't expect to be watching the trial every day. They're watching sites like Thugger Daily to kind of highlight highlights for them. So new day and age, but
it is. And yes. Well, thank you for what you do, Meghann.
Thank you so much for joining us, and maybe sometime later we can talk again about the trial. I know everyone is always has questions on it. It was here for a year, and that's one thing I was going to ask you about deliberations. Did you have any prediction of how long deliberations would be?
I kind of thought they would be back before Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
I did.
So not quite then. A couple days longer.
No, and I got slightly worried when they went all day Monday, and I was not expecting so early Tuesday.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, there we go. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. That was great. And I know there's so much news going on today with Jay-Z being added to the Diddy lawsuit, and there's so much back and forth with him and Tony Busby. But hey, you guys could have been anywhere today listening to anything, and you chose to be here. So thank you so much. And shout out to the replay crew. We couldn't do it without you. And I'm going to see what I can do to break this up into parts, different videos, so you guys can get some highlights. And I see somebody asking if Brian Steele really doesn't talk to Miss Love at all. I'm guessing she wouldn't want to get into the details of that just because it's like Brian Steele's business, but he seemed to pretty well mean it. And I can't imagine this, acquittal made Love like him better, but we'll see. But anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in. Check the replay clips later, and then I'm going to try to do a live later this week about Diddy and Jay-Z and all of that stuff because there's so much going on. But thanks again, guys. See you later.